Will Smith was wrapping up another day of interviews and meetings, when he received an unexpected call. The producer of a popular television network was on the line, asking him to do something unusual, appear on their morning show to give the weather forecast. At first, it sounded like a joke. Will was known worldwide as an actor, not a meteorologist. But the producer insisted it would be fun and would give the audience something fresh. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. By the way, what city are you watching us from? Write it in the comments, we're curious. Curious and eager for a change of pace, Will agreed. He wasn't expecting much from it, just a quick, light-hearted segment before heading to his next project. The idea of doing something unexpected and fun excited him. Will had been through the grind of being a Hollywood star for years. He had faced criticism, the spotlight, and the pressures of his career. But he didn't mind, it was all part of the job. So, on the day of the broadcast, he walked into the studio with his usual smile, ready to have a little fun with the audience. The set was bustling with activity when he arrived. Crew members were busy, lights were being adjusted, and cameras were rolling. Will was greeted with enthusiasm. The producers were excited about the new direction of the segment. It seemed harmless enough, a quick weather report with Will adding his charm to make it interesting. Everyone seemed to think it was just another day on set, but neither Will nor the crew had any idea that this would be a day that would change everything. As the broadcast began, Will stood in front of the green screen, ready to make the audience laugh. It was meant to be light and easy, but things were about to take a turn he never saw coming. The moment the cameras started rolling, Will flashed his signature grin. He readied himself to deliver the weather forecast with his usual flair, mixing a bit of humor with the usual meteorological data. The viewers at home would expect something fun, maybe a couple of jokes about the rain or the sunshine. He had done thousands of interviews, but this felt different, more laid back. But as the broadcast continued, something shifted. He noticed the director's smile falter as he glanced nervously at the control room. The tension in the studio was palpable, but Will didn't understand why. He kept his cool, cracking jokes, and glancing at the weather map as though everything was normal. Then, it happened. A loud, unmistakable sound came from the back of the studio. Will turned to see a small group of people entering the studio. They were dressed sharply in suits, clearly out of place in a casual TV studio. The leader of the group, a man in his late 50s with a sharp jawline and cold eyes, approached the front desk where the show's producers were standing. Will could feel the change in energy, but he kept going, unaware of the storm brewing behind the scenes. The group's arrival seemed to trigger something in the room. Suddenly, the head producer, a woman who had been all smiles moments before, grew stiff and distracted. Her focus shifted from Will to the newcomers. Will continued with the weather forecast, unaware that his next words would lead to something far more serious. A few minutes into the broadcast, the sound of an interrupting voice broke through the peaceful moment. Someone from the group in suits began shouting from the back of the room. Will froze for a second. The audience, still watching, had no idea what was happening. "Why is a black man doing the weather?" the man yelled, loud enough for everyone in the studio to hear. It was sharp, cutting through the light-hearted atmosphere of the broadcast like a blade. The cameras shifted awkwardly. The producer looked torn between stopping the broadcast and keeping things on air. But before she could make a decision, security personnel moved swiftly. The tension in the room skyrocketed as Will's security rushed to the front. He felt a cold chill run through him. His smile faded for the first time since stepping onto the set. "Get him out of here," the man continued, his voice laced with contempt. Will's heart pounded as he realized what was happening. The group was there to make sure he didn't finish the broadcast, all because of his skin color. He stood frozen, not knowing what to do. The producer's face was pale. Will saw them signal to security. It was clear now, the studio wasn't in control of this situation anymore. And as they started to move toward him, Will understood the gravity of the moment. This wasn't just about a weather segment anymore. This was a fight for respect, a moment he'd never anticipated. In a split second, Will's mind raced. The world could be watching this, his career, his reputation, all on the line. But there was something deeper at play, something more important than a show. It was a battle against the ugly truth of racism that still lingered, even in places where it seemed to be forgotten. Security ushered him off the set, and the cameras went dark. The audience at home was left with questions, confusion, anger, and disbelief. No one, especially Will, knew what would happen next. Backstage, Will stood motionless, his heart still racing from what had just unfolded. His security had escorted him to a quiet room, away from the chaos in the studio. The anger bubbled inside him, but he fought to keep it under control. He had been a star for decades, facing challenges, controversies, and setbacks, but this was different. The door opened, and the head producer walked in, her face pale and apologetic. "Will, I'm so sorry. It's unbelievable," she said, her voice trembling. Will didn't respond right away. He sat down, his thoughts a whirlwind. Then, the man who had caused the scene, the one in the suit, entered the room. His face was flushed with anger, and he was followed by two of the studio's security guards. Will didn't flinch. "I want to know why you did that," Will said quietly, his voice steady but firm. He stared the man down, waiting for an answer. The man shifted uncomfortably. He glanced at the security guards, then back at Will. "I don't know who you think you are," he sneered, "but you're not supposed to be here. This is our studio. You don't belong in front of that camera, doing that job." The words hit Will like a punch to the stomach, but he didn't react. Instead, he took a deep breath and leaned forward, his eyes locking with the man's. "Is it because I'm black?" Will asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man's eyes narrowed. "That's not." "No," Will interrupted, shaking his head. "You don't get to hide behind that. I've spent my whole life fighting to get where I am. And I'm not just talking about fame. I've fought against the racism that you refuse to acknowledge. You think just because I'm in the public eye that this stuff doesn't still happen?" The man opened his mouth to speak, but Will raised his hand, stopping him. "It's not about me. It's about every single person like me who gets judged, ridiculed, or excluded simply because of the color of their skin." For the first time, the man seemed to falter. He looked away, clearly uncomfortable. Will's eyes didn't leave him. "I've been here before," Will continued, his voice more resolute now. "I've walked through doors that were slammed in my face. I've had doors shut before I even touched the handle. I've been looked at, doubted, and belittled, just like millions of others." Will paused, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. "But I didn't stop. And I won't stop. Because this is bigger than me. It's about the people who don't have a voice, the ones who are silenced by their own skin color. I'm not here just for the spotlight. I'm here to make sure that when people like me walk into a room, we are seen for who we are, not for the color of our skin." The man had nothing to say. His face was red, and his eyes betrayed the unease he was trying to hide. Will stood up, his posture tall, proud. "Now, you're going to leave. But I need you to understand something," Will said, his voice calm but firm. "This moment, it's not just about you or me. It's a reminder that the work isn't over. It's a reminder that no one, should have to fight just to be seen as human." The man, realizing the depth of what Will had just said, nodded slowly and walked out, his head lowered. Will sat back down. His mind was still reeling, but there was a calmness in him now. He had spoken his truth, and it wasn't just for himself. It was for everyone who had ever been dismissed, overlooked, or dehumanized. And as the door closed behind the man, Will let out a slow breath, finally allowing himself a moment of reflection. The storm had passed, but it wasn't over. It would never be over until things changed. The room was still, heavy with the aftermath of the confrontation. Will sat in the quiet space, his thoughts swirling, but his resolve growing stronger. He wasn't just going to let this moment fade into the background. What happened today needed to matter, not just for him, but for everyone who had ever felt the sting of racism and prejudice. As the minutes passed, Will stood up, his mind already focused on what needed to happen next. He wasn't going to let this incident define him, but he was going to use it to spark something bigger. By the time the cameras were ready to roll again, Will had already spoken with the producers, making it clear that he was going to take control of the narrative. He didn't want just an apology or a quiet resolution. He needed change. He needed action. When the studio lights flickered back on, Will was ready. He walked back to the stage, this time not just as a guest but as someone with a purpose. The audience, still buzzing from the earlier drama, fell silent as they saw him step onto the set. He was no longer just an actor or a celebrity. He was a voice, one that couldn't be ignored. Will addressed the camera directly, his eyes steady and full of purpose. "What happened earlier today wasn't just about me," he began, his voice calm but forceful. "It wasn't just about me being a black man in a studio. It's about every single person who faces discrimination because of their skin color, their name, or where they come from." He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle. "I've been lucky. I've had opportunities that many others don't. But the truth is, every day, millions of people are still fighting battles I can't even imagine. And it's not enough to just keep fighting privately. We need to bring these issues to the forefront, where they can no longer be ignored." Will's eyes locked with the camera. "I'm not just standing here to say I was wronged. I'm standing here because I want to make sure this never happens again, not just for me, but for all the people who will follow me. It's time for a new fight. A fight for equality, for respect, and for change." The studio was silent, hanging on his every word. Will knew this was the moment that could make a difference. He wasn't just going to move past this situation. He was going to use it to fuel something much larger. Change doesn't happen when we stay silent. Change happens when we speak up. When we act. "I'm here to remind you all that no matter where you come from, no matter the color of your skin, you deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard. And you deserve the same respect as anyone else." Will's voice softened for a moment, but his resolve remained firm. "I know the journey is long. I know that change won't come overnight. But it starts with us. It starts right here, right now. And I'm ready to fight for it." As Will finished, the camera zoomed in, capturing the raw emotion and power in his words. The room erupted into applause. It wasn't just for him, it was for the message he had sent. Will had turned an unjust situation into a call to action. He wasn't done yet. This was only the beginning of a new fight for change. And he wasn't backing down. The next few weeks felt like a whirlwind for Will. The media exploded with coverage of the incident, but this time, it wasn't just about the scandal. It was about what came after. His words had struck a chord. People everywhere began talking, not just about what had happened in that studio, but about the larger issues that still plagued society. The conversation was shifting. Will didn't stop. He wasn't interested in being the story, he wanted to be part of the solution. He teamed up with activists, influencers, and community leaders to keep the momentum going. He took to social media, sharing messages of unity and empowerment. He spoke at events, not as a star, but as an advocate. Every opportunity became a platform for him to challenge the status quo and demand better. But it wasn't just about big speeches. Will made sure to meet with the people who mattered, the ones who had been silenced for far too long. He spent time with young black men and women, listening to their struggles, their dreams, their pain. He didn't just talk about change, he was living it. Back in the studio, the network took notice. The public outcry forced them to re-evaluate their practices. They made a formal apology, not just to Will, but to the community. The studio underwent diversity training, ensuring that every staff member, from the camera operators to the producers, understood the importance of respect and inclusion. Will's influence had pushed them to do more than just offer an apology, they were committed to long-term change. Even the manager, who had been at the center of the controversy, began to make amends. She reached out to Will, asking for a chance to learn from her mistake. Will agreed to meet with her, not to accuse her, but to help her understand the impact of her actions. In a private conversation, they discussed how bias and prejudice could unknowingly shape behavior. The dialogue was uncomfortable at times, but it was necessary. Months later, Will returned to the same studio, this time as a guest on a special program dedicated to racial equality. The set was different, the energy had changed. The audience was more diverse, and the atmosphere was filled with hope. Will took his seat at the desk, not just as an actor, but as a leader in the fight for social justice. The show aired, and this time, no one was escorted out. Instead, the conversation was full of respect, empathy, and real solutions. Will's story had become a symbol of what could happen when you didn't stay silent. It was a reminder that change begins with one voice, one action, and one person who's willing to stand up for what's right. And as the credits rolled on that program, Will smiled to himself. It wasn't over, but the change had begun, and he was proud to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video to show your support.